I lay on cold rocks at the bottom of a Smoky Mountains ravine, my shoulder on fire, my mouth full of blood, while I heard my own son and his wife above me deciding if I was dead. My husband pressed his lips to my ear and whispered, "Pretend we're dead," and I hated how fear made me obey so fast. I listened to Evan's voice and Kelsey's calm, cold breathing shift as they said we looked done, like we were a problem they could finally erase. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it through the trees. They thought they were in control, but they didn't know I already had something prepared. Friends, before we dive into this story, I want to ask for a small favor. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. And let me know what country and city you're listening from so I can thank you properly as we go through this together. Cold rock presses into my cheek, and the smell of wet leaves and pine sap fills my nose so completely it makes me gag. My shoulder burns like it's been split open, every shallow breath slicing through me, and my mouth tastes metallic and thick with blood. I try to lift my head out of instinct, but pain slams me back down, stealing the air from my lungs. Above me, somewhere far too close, I hear Evan's voice calling out my name. It doesn't sound frantic the way it should. It sounds controlled, measured. That's when Marcus's face appears in my peripheral vision, dirt-streaked, eyes blown wide with terror and clarity at the same time. He inches his mouth to my ear, barely moving his lips, and whispers, "Pretend we're dead." The words don't feel like a suggestion. They feel like a command dropped straight into my spine. Every part of me wants to cry out, to reach for my child, but fear clamps down harder. I let my body fall heavy and slack against the rocks, hating how quickly my muscles obey. I hate myself for it, even as I know it's the only thing keeping me alive. My heart is smashing against my ribs so violently I'm sure the sound carries upward. I count my breaths, tiny and shallow, pulling air through my nose so my chest barely moves. Dirt sticks to my lips, mixing with blood, and I focus on that instead of the pain screaming through my arm. Evan's footsteps scrape closer to the edge above us, loose gravel skittering down past my legs. A sharp flash of memory hits me. Him as a boy, running ahead on trails, always pushing too far, always daring his brother to follow. The memory feels misplaced now, like it belongs to another woman's life. I hear Kelsey swearing under her breath, her voice tight and fast at first, then gradually slowing. There's panic, yes, but there's also calculation creeping in, and that makes my stomach twist harder than the fall did. I keep my eyes closed, even though everything in me wants to look up and see their faces. Seeing would make it real in a way I don't think I can survive yet. Kelsey's breathing changes before her words do. At first it's harsh and shallow, like she might throw up or scream. Then it evens out, steadying in a way that feels wrong. I think they're done, she says, not loud, not soft, just practical. Like she's talking about returning something defective. Evan doesn't answer right away. I imagine him scanning below, judging the impossible angle, deciding whether it's worth climbing down. The thought of his face looking for signs of life makes my skin prickle. My body hums with the effort of staying still. Every nerve wants to flinch, to react, to survive loudly. Instead, I become weight. Rock. Nothing. Evan finally exhales, a sound halfway between relief and annoyance. "No one could survive that," he mutters. Those words land on me heavier than the impact ever did. Not because they're wrong, but because of how easily he says them. They talk above us like we aren't people anymore, like we're a problem that solved itself. I hear them discussing scrapes and bruises, complaining about the hike back, debating whether their phones still work. Normal logistics, everyday inconveniences. My mind starts racing faster than my heart now, searching the moment for some explanation that doesn't involve what I know deep down is happening. Accidents don't sound like this. Fear sounds messy, loud, desperate. This sounds clean. This sounds planned. As that truth settles into my chest, something hard forms around it, wrapping itself tight around my ribs and spine. I feel Marcus's fingers twitch against mine, just enough to tell me he's still alive. That tiny movement anchors me. I realize then that if I move, if I make a sound, this ends here. Not just my life, but whatever chance we have to understand why this happened and how far it goes. Time stretches in strange, painful chunks. Seconds feel swollen, heavy, filled with pressure. I notice ridiculous details. The way a trickle of water runs past my ankle, the itch under my jaw I can't scratch, the cold seeping into my back through my jacket. Above us, voices fade in and out as Evan and Kelsey move around, stepping away, then returning. Each return tightens my chest again. I wait for guilt. I wait for a crack, a sob, some sign that this is a terrible mistake they'll undo. It never comes. When they finally decide our bodies look done, the phrase hits me so hard I almost laugh. Almost. They say it like closing a file, like ticking a box. Footsteps retreat, the gravel stops falling. Silence settles over the ravine, deep and unnatural. I keep my eyes closed long after their voices disappear, afraid the smallest movement will bring them back. When I finally let myself breathe a little deeper, the pain roars to life again. But it no longer frightens me the way it did at first. Pain means I'm still here. Living means this isn't over. Lying there in the cold and blood and dirt, something shifts inside me. The shock doesn't vanish, but it sharpens, turning into focus. I replay their voices, their words, the steadiness of their decisions, and my fear begins to harden into something hotter, more precise. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't love gone wrong. This was intention. I'm not just broken at the bottom of a mountain. I'm targeted. And as the realization settles, my body stays still, but my mind starts moving fast, mapping what survival will require. The terror is still there, heavy and loud, but underneath it, a fierce determination takes root. If pretending to be dead keeps me alive right now, I'll do it. And if staying alive means facing what my own son chose to do, then that truth, no matter how brutal, is coming with me out of this ravine. The dirt pressed into my face was wet and smelled like rot. My shoulder pulsed in deep, nauseating waves, and every breath tasted like copper and bark. I kept my eyes shut. My ears were doing all the work. Above us, leaves rustled under shifting feet, voices low and frantic. Evan's sharp, clipped tone and Kelsey's rushed whisper, like they were trying to hold it together but already slipping. I didn't move a muscle, even as a sob crawled up my throat. Marcus's hand found mine in the dark, his grip weak but present. I could feel him shaking, not from pain. This was something else, deeper. He leaned toward me, barely brushing my ear, and his voice cracked as he whispered, "I need to tell you something." I didn't answer. I couldn't. But I kept still, listening to the sound of my world falling apart all over again. "This isn't the first time," he said, and my breath caught. "Not the first time this family ended up on a mountain, with blood on it." I turned my face toward him just slightly. He kept going, his voice breaking in pieces, and I braced for something I wasn't ready to hear. He started talking about Andre, not in the vague, hushed way we had for the last 2 decades, but with trembling, raw detail. "That night, 22 years ago, I saw them fighting," he said. "Andre and Evan. It got ugly." My ears rang. I heard it, but it didn't land all at once. He was whispering fast, terrified, like the words had been choking him all this time. Andre had something in his hand, like a rock or a phone. I don't know. And Evan shoved him. It wasn't an accident, not really. I opened my eyes then. Just a sliver. Enough to see Marcus's face in the faint light slipping through the canopy. He looked like a man digging his own grave with his tongue. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. "He was all we had left," Marcus said, and his voice cracked on the word, left. My stomach turned. I wanted to scream, but I had to stay frozen, quiet, invisible. For now. I didn't feel the cold anymore, just the heat rising under my skin like wildfire. Marcus helped cover it up. Andre's death. My boy. All these years, I thought grief had taken him. But no, my other son had. And Marcus had chosen silence over justice, over me, over truth. I couldn't make sense of it. I remembered how he held me at the funeral, how he whispered that sometimes God takes the good ones early. Liar. My whole marriage snapped like a branch underfoot. I kept thinking of Andre's smile, the way he used to protect Evan when they were little. I thought I had lost a son to fate. Turns out I lost both, one to death and the other to something colder. Evan didn't fall into this cruelty. He's been walking in it for years, and Marcus watched it happen. The worst part, I don't know who I am in this family anymore. I feel like a ghost between two men I thought I knew. I wanted to grab Marcus and shake him. I wanted to ask him what kind of father helps his son erase a body, what kind of husband hides that from the woman he swore to share everything with. But I couldn't risk a sound, not while Evan and Kelsey were still nearby. They thought we were dead. I had to let them keep thinking that. So instead of screaming, I buried it. For now. Every inch of me was buzzing with rage, betrayal, disbelief. But I kept my breathing shallow and slow. I pressed my face into the forest floor and let the confession settle into my bones like poison. Marcus had protected a murderer, and I had slept beside him for 22 years. There was no room in my body for forgiveness, not yet. Maybe not ever. I didn't know how to look at Marcus anymore, but I also didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Evan had tried to finish what he started back then. Only this time, both of us were in the way. And Kelsey, she wasn't just following, she was in on it. Her voice wasn't scared up there. It was cold, efficient. That's what I kept hearing. They weren't running for help. They were walking away from the scene, from us, from what they thought was a job well done. They're gone, Kelsey had said. I remembered those words exactly. Like we were a line in a spreadsheet, a problem solved. They didn't just want us quiet. They wanted us erased. As the silence deepened and the crunching footsteps moved farther away, I let myself breathe just a little deeper. My shoulders screamed with every shift, but I didn't care. The physical pain was nothing compared to what was tearing through me inside. I was no longer just a mother clinging to survival. I was a woman sitting in the wreckage of her own life, holding the shattered pieces of trust and truth, and trying to decide what the hell to do next. One thing was clear. I wasn't leaving this mountain the same woman who came up it. I had lost the fantasy of family, but I had gained something sharp, something cold and clear. My son had tried to destroy me, and my husband had lied to protect him. I couldn't fix the past, but if I made it off that mountain, I would make damn sure the truth finally saw daylight. Even if it tore the rest of everything apart. The light hit my eyes like a punch. I blinked against it, my face still slack, my body still in survival mode. Cold metal scraped under my back as they lifted me onto the stretcher, and I let my limbs stay limp, my mouth stay shut. I didn't know who these rescue workers were, if they'd been called by Evan, or if they'd finally spotted our bodies by chance, but I wasn't ready to trust anything yet. My shoulder throbbed with a sharp, steady pulse, but I held my face still, forcing every muscle to stay loose. I caught a brief glimpse of Marcus as they rolled him beside me, his skin pale, his eyes flicking to mine, and the faintest nod like we were still on the same page. Don't speak. Don't react. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood again, just to stay grounded. Then I heard it. His voice. Evan. He came running up like he'd just witnessed a tragedy, his voice high and cracking like it cost him something to fake grief. "Oh my God, is she alive? Is Mom okay?" he shouted, loud enough for everyone in uniform to hear. I watched the rescue worker nod and say something about head trauma and stabilizing vitals. Evan crouched next to me, his hand brushing my wrist too casually, and I fought the urge to yank it back. His face was streaked with dirt and what looked like a smear of blood on his temple. Not enough blood for a real injury, a performance. His eyes welled up with tears that had no weight behind them, and one landed on my cheek like an insult. If I had the strength, I would have slapped it off. "She doesn't even recognize me," he said, putting on a devastated voice that could have won him an award. Inside, I was screaming. And then came Kelsey. Hair still perfect, makeup only slightly smudged, holding my bag like she'd been the one who carried me out of the woods. "We've been so worried," she said, her voice warm like honey laced with arsenic. "We thought we lost you both." She clutched Evan's arm and laid her hand on my foot as if we shared something sacred. I stared at her fingers. No dirt under her nails, no signs she'd touched a tree, let alone climbed through brush looking for anyone. My jaw clenched. I had no way to scream, no strength to pull away, but the rage bloomed hot in my chest. I was lying there, broken and betrayed, while the people who tried to kill me played loving family for the crowd. It felt like a second violation. One thing was clear. They were rehearsed. Smooth. They thought we were done, and they'd already moved into the next act of their lie. At the hospital, it was noise and paperwork and movement. They wheeled me into intake, asked me questions I barely registered. Date, name, emergency contact. I mumbled just enough to keep up the image of a confused, injured woman. I saw Evan speaking to a nurse behind the counter, pointing in my direction like he had some authority over me, like I was already a patient under his care. That's when I knew I had to move differently. I had to be smart. I looked at the nurse, short woman, late 40s maybe, tired eyes, and locked in on her. Just for a second. I widened my eyes a little and gave her a look that I hoped said, "Help me. Something's not right." She blinked, paused, then slowed down the form she was filling out. I held on to that moment like a lifeline. If she caught on to even a sliver of my fear, that could be the thread I needed. Every word that came out of Evan's mouth was another twist of the knife. "She's been confused since the fall," he told the nurse, hand on his chest like it hurt him to say it. "My dad, too. We're just trying to help. We're all they have left." That phrase hit me hard. All they have left. I knew what he meant. He thought Andre was buried deep enough, and now we were supposed to be gone too. But I wasn't gone. Not yet. And Marcus wasn't either. I could feel the air between us even when we weren't touching. We were both alert now. Both angry. Both waiting for the right moment to speak. But we couldn't rush it. One wrong move and they'd try again, this time maybe with morphine or forged papers. We had to be careful, cautious, alive. Lying in that hospital bed with wires on my chest and monitors beeping around me, I felt smaller than I'd ever felt. I was surrounded by people who should have loved me, protected me, and instead they were circling like vultures, pretending to prey. I had to play along, for now. But inside, I was cataloging every word, every expression, every fake tear. My body hurt, yes, but my mind was sharpening fast. This wasn't just recovery, this was war, and I wasn't about to lose twice. Not as a mother, not as a woman. Not as someone who still had breath in her lungs and truth in her hands. Something had shifted in me, right there in that bed. I was terrified, but I was also awake. Fully awake, and I was going to make damn sure I stayed that way. The monitors beeped in soft, steady rhythms, while a nurse adjusted my IV line and scribbled something on her clipboard. I kept my gaze on the ceiling, pretending to be drowsy, distant. The lights were too white, the air too dry, and my whole body ached like it had been through a war. Because it had. The door opened with a soft click, and I didn't have to look to know who it was. Evan's cologne hit me first. Clean, expensive, fake. He moved to my bedside with the confidence of someone who'd practiced this role. "Hey, Mom," he said gently, then leaned in and squeezed my hand too tight, like he wanted to check if I'd flinch. I didn't. I let my fingers lie there limp. His smile was for the nurse behind him. A warm, perfect sun kind of smile. I hated it. Hated that I once believed in it. "She's improving," he told the nurse, like he owned the right to interpret my condition. I said nothing. The nurse nodded and left. That's when Kelsey glided in like she was stepping into a Hallmark movie. She held a bouquet, sunflowers and white roses, wrapped in gold paper, and placed it on the side table with a flourish. "We thought these might cheer you up," she said, her voice soft, sweet. It sounded like a woman talking to her mother-in-law after a long illness, not someone who'd helped toss her off a cliff. My skin crawled. "The doctor said you're strong," she added, smoothing down the blanket near my feet like she cared. Evan sat back down, brushing imaginary dust from my sheets, and for a second, They both looked at me like I was a project they'd finished, a story they were now controlling. "We're just relieved," Evan said, shaking his head. "It's been a lot." I watched them closely, still quiet, still playing weak. Every breath I took was measured. Every blink was deliberate. I needed them to believe I wasn't fully present. Because what they were saying wasn't love. It was narrative management. The real show started when Evan leaned closer and said, "We should probably talk about a few things. Just to be prepared." Kelsey nodded beside him too quickly. "The paperwork," she said. "You and Marcus were redoing some things before the trip, right? The will? The house?" I didn't respond. My face stayed neutral, eyes slightly unfocused, but inside, my stomach turned. That was the moment I knew for sure the fall wasn't just a snap decision. This trip was never about fall colors or fresh air. It was about a plan. Cleaning house, clearing the board, making sure things transferred the way they wanted them to. I felt my nails dig into the palm of my good hand, just enough to feel something sharp and grounding. "We can take care of it when you're feeling stronger," Evan added smoothly, his hand brushing my shoulder like an afterthought. I didn't move. Kelsey started talking about family strength and how hard times bring people closer. I almost laughed. Almost. She was calm, smiling, too comfortable in this role, like she'd done it before, or practiced it. I studied the way she folded her hands on her lap, the way she kept glancing at the monitors like she actually cared what they said. "We just want what's best," she added. "Whatever you need, we're here." The lie sat between us like fog, heavy and thick. And I realized they believed this was working, that their performance was landing. They thought the doctors and nurses saw loving relatives. They thought I was broken enough to go along. I let myself nod faintly. Just once, just enough. I needed to keep them comfortable, keep them overconfident. That was the only way I'd get ahead of whatever came next. When they finally left the room, I stared at the ceiling again. The flowers smelled too sweet. My mouth tasted like iron and bitterness. The door clicked shut behind them, and I exhaled slowly, deeply. I could feel my face relax for the first time all day, but not because I was safe, just because the mask I was wearing didn't need to be up for a few minutes. My head throbbed, my body screamed, but my mind was awake, sharper than ever. I saw them now, clearly. No more denial. No more hoping it was some misunderstanding or heat-of-the-moment panic. No. This was strategy, greed, survival at someone else's cost. And now it was my turn to survive. By the time the nurse came in to check my vitals, I was ready. I didn't say much, just offered her a small nod and let her do her job. But when she asked if I was in pain, I met her eyes and gave a slow blink, just once. Her expression shifted, barely, but it was enough. She knew something wasn't right. I didn't need to scream or accuse, not yet. I just needed time. Time to think. Time to move pieces where they belonged. Let Evan and Kelsey keep playing their parts. Let them believe I was slipping, fragile, grateful. They'd written their script already. But they forgot I knew how to rewrite mine, and from now on, I wouldn't miss a single cue. Marcus's room was dim except for the soft green and amber lights from the monitors pulsing beside his bed. The hallway outside had finally gone quiet. No more nurses checking vitals, no fake visits from Evan pretending to be concerned. I pulled the curtain closed halfway and sat on the edge of the chair, leaning in close to Marcus. He looked pale, exhausted, but alert, like a man who had been holding something heavy for too long and was finally ready to drop it. His hand shook slightly as he reached under the blanket and pulled out his phone, then slipped it into mine like it was something dangerous. "Play the file labeled insurance," he whispered, barely audible. I didn't ask questions. I just held the phone tight, feeling the weight of it grow heavier by the second. He looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed and ashamed. "I recorded them, before the trip. I heard them planning something. That's why I told you about Andre. I couldn't lie to you anymore." I turned the phone over in my hands, trying not to tremble. "You recorded our son?" I asked, my voice raw. Marcus nodded once. "And Kelsey. They didn't know I was in the garage. They were in the driveway talking, but I caught it. They were trying to sound careful, but they weren't. They thought they were clever. I tapped the file open with my thumb and raised the volume just enough to hear it under the beeping machines. Evan's voice came through first. Calm, casual, like he was talking business. The Wills are still in their name. If anything happens, we're locked out. We can't wait another year for this crap to clear up. The debts are killing us. Then Kelsey, low and sharp. People fall. You'd be surprised how often. We just have to make sure it's the kind of accident no one questions. My breath caught. I stopped the recording and stared at the screen, feeling like I'd been punched again. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to rip the IV out of my arm and storm into their smug little hotel room and scream. But instead, I sat back and stared at the floor. My son, the same boy I carried, sang to, rocked to sleep, was planning my death like it was a strategy meeting. And Marcus, the man I'd trusted with every piece of myself, had held onto this secret until a second murder attempt pushed it out of him. My heart felt like it had splintered into pieces I didn't recognize. I didn't even know what to call this feeling. It wasn't just grief. It wasn't just betrayal. It was something deeper. Something that made me feel like my identity as a mother had been stabbed clean through. I thought about the grandkids. I thought about how Evan tucked them in at night, smiled at school events, handed out birthday gifts. Could they ever know this? Should they? I couldn't protect Andre, Marcus said softly. But I thought I could protect you. I thought I could fix it, or at least stop it from happening again. His voice cracked on the last word. I didn't speak. I just stared at him, not out of hatred, but out of a deep, shaking loss. For all the years we built a life on silence and denial. For the nights we said prayers over a dinner table Evan had already turned cold. I felt sick at how I smiled through holidays, thinking I was honoring Andre's memory when half of it was built on a lie. But even as that guilt tried to choke me, something else started to rise up. Not forgiveness, not yet, but clarity. I saw it now. There was no way out of this that didn't cost something. I just had to decide what I was willing to lose. Keeping this recording quiet would protect the family's image. It would keep Evan's name off the news, maybe let the grandkids grow up without shame. But it would also mean letting them win. It would mean being complicit in my own erasure. Letting them rewrite the narrative until I became just another old woman who slipped on a trail. And I couldn't do it. I wouldn't. Not after Andre. Not after this. I looked at Marcus and said, "We're not hiding this. I don't care what happens to the name or the legacy. We tell the truth. All of it. All." He didn't argue. He just nodded, slowly, like a man who'd been waiting to be told what to do. I turned the phone screen off and held it close to my chest. My hand still hurt, my body was still bruised, but inside me something had shifted. I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. I couldn't save everyone, but I could damn sure stop pretending. The chapel was empty when I stepped inside, except for the faint buzz of a fluorescent light and the smell of old wood polish. I sat in the third pew, slowly, careful with my arms still stiff in the sling. The silence wrapped around me, thick but not comforting. I wasn't there to pray. Not really. I just needed space to let a name rise in my chest without choking on it. Andre. Just saying it in my head made my eyes burn. I hadn't let myself sit with his name in years, not fully. I'd spoken it during holidays, in stories to the grandkids, in that gentle, cautious way people talk about someone who died too young. But I never sat in the raw weight of what I lost. Until now. I looked up at the plain wooden cross and let the memory hit me like another fall. His funeral, the closed casket, the way Evan didn't cry. I had trained myself to believe the police report, the pastor's words, the clean version of a tragedy, because anything else would have shattered me. But sitting there, I finally admitted it. I didn't just lose a son. Something was taken from him. I let my mind go back to their childhood, to the years when Evan followed Andre everywhere, quiet but always watching. There were moments, sharp and buried, that began surfacing now. Evan breaking Andre's project on purpose, then denying it with a blank face. Evan twisting Andre's words in front of us, making him look like a liar. Little acts I dismissed as rivalry. I thought it was normal brother stuff. God, I thought I was being fair. But looking back, I see how often I brushed off Andre's frustration. I see how often Marcus told him, "Be patient, he's your little brother," and how Andre would bite his tongue to keep the peace. And I, his mother, kept asking him to be the bigger person, without ever asking Evan to be better. I feel sick when I think of that. It wasn't my fault Evan grew into this, but I gave him too much space. I mistook quiet for harmless. I mistook control for maturity. I raised one boy to carry the weight and the other to feel entitled to everything. I rested my good hand on my knee, gripping the fabric of my pants just to have something to hold on to. The truth was ugly, but it was real. I couldn't keep playing the role of the broken-hearted mother without acknowledging the role I played in this silence. I didn't kill Andre, but I let the air around his death stay too quiet for too long. I chose comfort over questions. I let Evan become the only son, and I didn't look too closely at what that meant. And when Marcus told me what he saw that night, when he admitted that Andre's death wasn't just a fall, it was like losing him all over again. Only this time, it came with guilt, because now I knew he hadn't just slipped. He'd been pushed, physically and slowly over years, by a brother who couldn't handle his shadow, and by parents who didn't want to admit something dark was growing under their roof. I closed my eyes and whispered Andre's name into the still air, not asking for forgiveness, but promising him something. No more silence. No more pretending. He deserved the truth. He deserved to have someone say it out loud, not just think it quietly and cry behind closed doors. I don't care what it costs anymore. Money, family, image. I won't protect the lie that buried him. My body may be healing, but this part of me is wide awake now. Awake and furious. I'm not going to carry the burden of protecting Evan's future when Andre never got one. I thought love meant sacrifice. But I'm learning that real love, the kind Andre deserved, demands truth, even when it hurts, even when it breaks everything else apart. Somewhere outside the chapel door, I could hear footsteps, maybe a nurse or someone from the social worker's office. I didn't move. I wasn't ready to return to hospital rooms and paperwork and questions. I needed one more minute in this quiet space to feel my grief fully, without interruption. Not the sanitized grief people offer with casseroles and hugs. The real kind. The kind that claws at your ribs and leaves you hollow. I let it in. For Andre. For the boy who smiled wide and read too much and always let his brother take the front seat. I see him clearly now, and I see what I owe him. He doesn't need sainthood. He just needs truth. And I'm going to give it to him, no matter what it destroys, because some things deserve to be destroyed. As I stood to leave, I felt something shift in my chest, not lighter exactly, but more stable. The truth was heavy, yes, but lying had been heavier. Carrying guilt without clarity had been like dragging a chain. Now I had something else to carry. Purpose. My hands were still shaking. My body still broken. But my mind was done with fog. Evan wanted me quiet, wanted me grateful and confused and easy to manage, but he underestimated what truth does to a mother's heart. It burns, and it sharpens, and it prepares you for war. I walked out of that chapel slow but steady, holding Andre's name in my chest like a weapon, like a prayer, like a vow. The straps on the wheelchair rubbed against the inside of my arm as the nurse wheeled me into the small consultation room. The walls were a pale, forgettable beige, and the light above buzzed faintly, adding to the tension already pressing into my chest. I could feel Evan's eyes before I even saw him, sharp, burning into my back like he was trying to will me into silence. He stood just outside the room, arms crossed, too casual for someone whose parents had just fallen. I forced my face into something soft and neutral. No anger, no fear. The detective, a tall black woman with calm eyes and a badge clipped to her belt, pulled up a chair across from me and opened her notebook. "I just need to go over a few things about the incident," she said. Her tone was gentle, but I heard the weight behind it. This wasn't just protocol. Something in her voice told me she was already wondering if things didn't add up. I nodded slowly and kept my words measured. We were walking near the overlook. Kelsey wanted photos. The view was beautiful, and the trail was a little slick from the morning dew. My throat tightened, but I pushed through it. I slipped first, I think. I heard Marcus yell my name. I paused, breathing through the ache in my ribs. Then I felt something hard against my back. I couldn't catch myself. I didn't say the words, "Evan pushed me." Not yet. I wasn't ready to unleash that storm until the recording was in safe hands. I needed to protect Marcus. Needed to control the timeline. The detective jotted something down, eyes flicking up every few seconds. She wasn't rushing. She was watching, listening between the lines. Then, right on cue, Kelsey stepped into the doorway with a too bright smile and a folder clutched in her arms. "She's been confused since the fall," Kelsey said quickly, not even waiting to be asked. "It was really chaotic. We all tried to help, but it happened so fast." The detective raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. "We're still piecing it together too," Kelsey added, her tone overly sweet. She stepped farther into the room, closer than she needed to be. My pulse spiked. They were near the edge because I asked them to pose there. I've been feeling guilty about that all week. Her voice cracked just enough to sound rehearsed. I turned my head slowly, locking eyes with her, and let silence sit between us for just a second too long. That's when the detective looked back at me and asked, "Did you notice anyone behind you when you slipped?" Before I could answer, Kelsey cut in again. She wouldn't have. It was too quick. The detective didn't blink, but I saw the shift. Subtle, quiet. She wrote something down with a firmer hand. I reached into the small pouch clipped to the side of the wheelchair. My fingers brushed the smooth surface of Marcus's phone. I hesitated. My heart thudded hard in my chest, but I couldn't wait any longer. "There's a recording on here," I said quietly, holding the phone out with both hands. "You'll want to listen to the file called Insurance." My voice didn't shake, but my hands did. The detective took it with a nod, placing it gently into a small evidence bag from her satchel. "Is this related to what happened?" she asked. I met her eyes directly. "Yes." That was all I gave her. I couldn't say more with Evan still lingering outside, pretending to read something on his phone, pretending not to listen. My whole body was tight, every muscle locked with tension. But the moment the phone left my hand, I felt a crack in the pressure. The detective stood up, voice still calm. "I'll follow up once I've reviewed this." She looked between me and Kelsey, then stepped past her without another word. Kelsey lingered a moment, like she wanted to say something else, maybe salvage the performance, but she didn't. She turned and followed the detective, her shoes clicking down the hallway. I stayed still in the chair, every nerve on edge, waiting for the moment the door clicked shut again. And when it did, I let myself exhale, just once, shaky and deep. My hands were still trembling, my chest still tight, but something had shifted. The story was no longer only in their hands. I had passed the weight to someone else, someone with authority, someone who, I hoped, wasn't fooled by staged concern and carefully planned lies. As the nurse returned to wheel me back to my room, I leaned into the chair and let the fluorescent lights blur above me. I still didn't know what was coming next, but I knew the silence was cracking. The recording was out. The detective had heard just enough to dig deeper. And Kelsey's eagerness to control the narrative had exposed something. I could feel it. The performance was faltering. They weren't in control anymore. Not fully. That power they thought they held so tight was beginning to slip through their fingers. And for the first time since that fall, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a witness, a dangerous one. The chair was too low, the table too high, and the fluorescent lights overhead made everything feel colder than it needed to. I sat with my sling resting on the edge of the table, fingers trembling just enough to notice. Across from me, a young social worker arranged some folders while an older woman in a dark blazer, clearly legal counsel, clicked open her pen. They both greeted me gently, voices soft, careful. I nodded through their introductions, barely hearing them. The words temporary guardianship, safety measures, and legal protection rang out like sirens in a fog. Marcus wasn't there. His blood pressure had spiked, and the doctors kept him under observation. So it was just me in that room, staring at the printed words that would begin to untangle decades of loyalty, silence, and denial. I could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on my chest. I knew what signing these papers meant. It meant Evan wouldn't have access to our finances. It meant someone else would oversee custody discussions for the grandkids. It meant I was choosing survival over tradition, and I was ready, until the door slammed open. Evan's voice hit me before I saw his face. "You really did it, didn't you?" he barked, striding into the room like it belonged to him. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" His eyes were wild, unfocused, red. He looked like someone who had just realized the ground beneath him wasn't solid anymore. I didn't answer. I stayed seated, stayed calm. The social worker stood up, blocking his path a little, but Evan waved her off. "This is a family matter," he snapped. Then he looked at me, just me. "You're destroying your own family over a misunderstanding." That word, misunderstanding, hit me like a slap. He said it with venom, with disbelief, with the arrogance of a man who still believed his mother's love would be his shield. "How could you betray us like this?" he added, loud and raw. But I heard what he really meant. "How dare you stop protecting me?" I sat there and let him rage, let him pace, let him perform. The attorney calmly asked him to leave, but he didn't. Not right away. He needed the last word. "Do you realize what you're doing? You're tearing this family apart." I finally spoke. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. "No, Evan. I'm refusing to let you tear it down any further." He froze, just for a second, like he hadn't expected me to talk back, like the mother in his mind still belonged to him. "Being your mother doesn't mean I'm your shield anymore," I said. "Not after what you've done. Not after what I've heard." His jaw clenched. I saw the flicker of panic behind his anger. He was losing control, and he knew it. The social worker stepped between us again, firmer now, and he finally turned and stormed out, muttering something under his breath that I didn't catch. The room went quiet again, but everything inside me was still shaking. I looked down at the papers on the table, then back at the attorney. She didn't rush me. She just waited. And so did I, for my heartbeat to settle, for the sting of his words to fade enough so I could think straight. Humiliation burned in my throat, not because he had power, but because he still thought he did, because he still believed I was someone who'd let herself be handled. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Evan had made me feel small for years, subtly, then not so subtly. But now, sitting here with legal documents in front of me and a room of witnesses, I realized he wasn't towering over me anymore. He was scrambling. He was reacting, and I was choosing. For once, I was the one choosing what happened next. I signed the papers. Slowly, clearly. My hand shook a little, but I didn't stop. I gave the phone number of the only friend I trusted as an emergency contact. I authorized restrictions on financial access. I approved temporary oversight for Marcus's care. The attorney nodded with quiet approval. The social worker thanked me. I leaned back in my chair and let the weight of it all settle in my bones. This wasn't just paperwork. It was protection, a boundary, a start. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt raw, like something had been torn open. But underneath all that pain was something new, a small, growing strength I didn't know I still had. I wasn't naive. I knew Evan wouldn't go quietly, but I also knew he wouldn't get to decide who I was anymore. As they gathered the forms and stood to leave, I sat a moment longer, alone at the table. My legs were tired and my body still ached, but my mind was clear. Evan's anger didn't shake me the way it used to. His disappointment didn't define me. His voice didn't own the room. I was afraid of what might come next, of what he might try, but that fear wasn't in charge anymore. It sat behind something stronger, behind a mother who finally understood that love without limits had nearly killed her. I was done bleeding for someone who'd smile while watching me fall. This family wasn't broken because I told the truth. It was already broken because we kept lying. And now it was time to rebuild, on truth, not fear. The courtroom was colder than I expected, or maybe it was just my body reacting to what was about to happen. The hard wooden bench pressed into my back, and the brace beneath my blouse made every breath a little tighter. I sat with my hands folded, knuckles white, trying to appear still while everything inside me trembled. Evan was seated at the defense table, suit crisp, jaw set like he still believed he had control over this. He didn't look at me. Not once. He looked confident, arrogant, as if this was a formality he'd get through, and then life would return to normal. But when the prosecutor stood up and announced, "We're going to play a recording entered into evidence," I saw the first crack. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just listened as his voice echoed through the room, cold, calculated, and unmistakably his. "If anything happens, we're in the will. It's not like anyone's gonna suspect a fall. They're old." The courtroom went still. Then came Kelsey's voice. "It just needs to look like an accident." And just like that, the mask started to slide off Evan's face. I watched him swallow hard, his eyes flicking to his lawyer, then briefly toward me. Not in apology. In panic. Like I had become a threat he never expected to bite back. I kept my expression blank. I didn't need to say anything. The recording was saying it all. I shifted slightly in my seat as the judge leaned forward, brows drawn tight. The prosecutor paused the recording and turned to Marcus, who had just been wheeled in and now sat beside the stand, pale but steady. When they asked him to speak about Andre, I felt my stomach twist. Marcus looked down at his lap for a long second before he began. "I didn't speak when I should have," he said, voice trembling. "I saw them fight that night, Andre and Evan. I believed it was grief, not guilt, that Evan showed me afterward. But I was wrong. I kept a secret I should have buried with the truth, not with my son." His voice cracked then, and the courtroom stayed quiet as a grave. I didn't know what I felt as I looked at Marcus. My heart ached for the man who had tried to love us all into safety, even when it meant suffocating the truth. I hated what he'd done, but I understood the fear that drove him. And it hurt, knowing that fear, his fear, my silence, helped Evan grow into someone who could plot our deaths like it was a business transaction. The judge leaned back, eyes sharp, and spoke with a calm authority that filled the room. "Based on this evidence, this court is issuing a warrant for the arrest of Evan Carter for attempted murder and obstruction of justice in the death of Andre Carter. Furthermore, we are reopening the investigation into that death effective immediately." Evan finally stood, blurting out something to his lawyer, but his words were tangled, desperate. The bailiff moved toward him, calm but firm. He didn't resist. Not really. He just looked shocked, like none of this was supposed to stick to him. Then came Kelsey. She stood up with a look of disbelief, like she was the true victim in all of this. She addressed the court, uninvited, emotional, rehearsed. "She's bitter," she said, nodding toward me. "She's painting us as villains because she can't deal with old grief. That's all this is." The prosecutor didn't even flinch. She calmly presented a string of financial documents, bank transfers, texts between Kelsey and an investor, proof that they were in deep, desperate debt, motive spelled out in numbers and screenshots. Kelsey's face went flat. She sank back into her chair, biting the inside of her cheek so hard she drew blood. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. My silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was the evidence they didn't plan for. All the years I spent surviving were now working against them. And that power shift was finally visible. As the hearing wrapped up, I sat still. I didn't feel joy. No satisfaction or triumph. Just the thick, heavy weight of truth finally spoken out loud. It didn't make Andre come back. It didn't erase the bruises or fix what had been broken between Marcus and me. But it gave shape to something I could finally stand on. Reality. Not a myth. Not a cleaned-up version of the past. Just what happened. And that somehow was enough. I looked over at Marcus, and he met my gaze with something close to peace. Not relief, not absolution, but maybe acceptance. The kind you only get after dragging a lie through too many years of silence. He reached for my hand. I let him take it. Walking out of that courtroom was like walking out of a long, dark tunnel. The light wasn't warm, it wasn't welcoming, but it was real. I felt the brace against my ribs with every step, a reminder of what had been done to me. And I also felt the strength under it. Quiet, grounded, earned. Justice, I realized, doesn't feel clean. It feels raw, exposing. Sometimes it feels like loss all over again, but it also gives you breath. And I hadn't breathed fully in 22 years. I stepped outside, lifted my face to the cold air, and let myself feel everything. No pretending, no armor. Just truth. That would be my future now, nothing else. The sunlight hit the kitchen table like it always had, but it felt different now. Warmer, maybe, or just more honest. I stood there, one hand resting on the back of a chair, breathing in the scent of brewed coffee and wood polish. This was my first morning home since the hospital, and everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. That table, the one under the window, still had a faint marker stain from when Andre did his homework there, leaning over his books with a pencil behind his ear. That same spot was where Evan used to sit, arms crossed, giving one-word answers, full of quiet resentment. I stood there and let those memories pass through me without looking away. I wasn't trying to erase anything. Not anymore. This house had held both joy and betrayal, and I wasn't pretending otherwise. I pulled out a chair and sat down, not out of routine but out of intention. I was claiming this space back, for myself. Marcus came in a few minutes later, slower than usual, but with a kind of softness I hadn't seen in him in a long time. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from me without saying anything at first. Then he spoke, not in apology, not in defense, but in plain, quiet words. "I'm looking for a therapist," he said. "Someone for me, and maybe, later, us." I nodded, unsure if I was ready for us again, but grateful he didn't assume it was automatic. We talked about the grandkids, about the money, about what rebuilding trust might look like if we even attempted it. I told him I needed time, and he didn't argue. He just said, "I know." For the first time in years, it felt like we were finally speaking as equals, not husband and wife performing some tired script, but two people standing in the wreckage and deciding what to do next. Later that afternoon, I sat with the children's counselor in a quiet office that smelled like crayons and peppermint. She asked me if I wanted to speak with the grandkids directly yet. I said not yet. I needed to be steady first. I told her my promise wasn't about having all the answers. It was about not hiding the questions anymore. I would be the adult who didn't lie to protect a false peace. I would not teach them that love means silence or that family loyalty means ignoring harm. If I was going to be in their lives, I wanted them to see a woman who survived something and refused to pretend it didn't happen. I owed them that, and I owed Andre that. The counselor nodded, respectful, not rushing me. "When you're ready," she said. I left that office feeling a little more grounded, still broken in places but less hollow. That night, I moved slow through the house, touching picture frames, dusting corners I hadn't noticed in months. I paused at the hallway where Evan's childhood photos hung. I didn't take them down. I just looked at them and told myself the truth. Both of my sons lived in this house, and both left marks on it. One with love, one with damage. But they were both real. I wasn't rewriting the past. I was refusing to blur it anymore. I was learning that healing doesn't mean deleting pain. It means holding it without letting it lead. And I was tired of letting grief and guilt decide what came next. I had lived too many years holding my breath around the truth. And even if the next years were quiet and lonely, they would be mine. Before bed, I stood in front of the mirror longer than I meant to. The bruises were fading, but the brace still pressed against my skin like a reminder. I touched it lightly, then reached underneath my blouse and unclipped it, slow and steady. My body was still healing, but I was strong enough to sleep without it now. As I folded it and placed it in the drawer, I caught my own reflection again. I didn't see a victim. I saw a woman who lost a son, was nearly killed by another, and still chose to fight for the truth. That kind of clarity doesn't fix everything, but it clears the path ahead. I turned off the light and climbed into bed, not with dread, but with a small, stubborn peace. In the dark, I let myself take a full breath. Not careful, not guarded, just full. I wasn't done grieving. I wasn't done being angry or scared or sad. But the power wasn't in Evan's hands anymore, and the truth wasn't some cursed thing we buried in hushed tones. I had said it. I had survived it. I had protected it. That meant something. It was the beginning of something. Maybe not happiness yet, maybe not forgiveness, but something honest. And that, finally, was mine. Friends, thank you for staying with me through every hard moment of my story. If my fight for truth and survival touched you in any way, please like this video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what comes next. I'd also love to hear where you're watching from, so drop your city or country in the comments and let me know what part of this journey hit your heart the most. Your support means more than you know, especially for stories like mine that are built on pain, courage, and the choice to keep going. And if this story resonated with you, there are more real-life inspired stories on this channel that carry the same mix of family secrets, betrayal, justice, and healing. Thank you again for listening to me and for being part of this community with love and respect.